Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning into A&A Webinar Wednesdays. Today's presentation is entitled Mobile Advertising ROI, Breakthrough Insights. Today's presenter is Rex Briggs, who is the CEO of Marketing Evolution. In today's webinar, Rex will discuss their study, which examined over 500 mobile campaigns to determine ROI and combined it with its database covering billions in marketing spend to generate the first of its kind recommendation for the share of media mix most marketers should devote to mobile advertising. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to our presenter. Rex, please take it away.
Thanks, Greg. I'm going to talk about mobile ROI, as Greg mentioned, from over 500 different studies we've examined. We've been looking at mobile ROI for almost a decade now. Our first study was back in 2003 as part of our cross-media research with ING. And we measured mobile advertising, as laughable as it is today, on a Palm Pilot, a little black and white screen, using an exposed control design by separating out zip codes. And we saw some early promise back then. But when you really look at the last 9 years since that first mobile ROI study, there's been so many advances. And our work with Motorola as they launched some of their great mobile devices and measuring cross-media, watching Apple and its great success with iPhone, the Android devices, and so forth. We've just seen the resolution of the screens get so much better, the adoption from consumers expand dramatically, and the number of studies measuring advertising effectiveness expand. And so we felt it was time to put our arms around all that research and begin to say, what insights can we draw from here, and what are the implications to the proper share of the mix that will help marketers optimize their business results. So what I'd like to do today is I'm going to take you through 5 topics. You can see them up on your screen here. First, I'm going to talk about our perspective on improving marketing ROI, so you know where I'm coming from and Marketing Evolution as a firm is coming from with our perspective. Second, I'm going to level set and take a look at how we examine marketing ROI and explain something called SURFs. Third, I'm going to talk about the marketing meta-analysis that we did on mobile. We're going to talk about what we've learned from those 500 studies, and that's really the heart of this presentation today. And then fourth, I'm going to translate that into what that means in terms of the share of mix, which is optimal for marketers. And of course, there's a range of different results there, so we'll talk about some of the dynamics that we saw in there that might make a marketer choose to spend more than what that average share of the mix would be or less. I'll conclude with a 5th point, which gives you some additional resources, including a white paper that documents what I'm going to talk about today, and share some next steps of what we're working on, and open up to Q&A from you all. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about Marketing Evolution's perspective on ROI. So this chart here is kind of a famous one inside our company because it's been our distillation of literally billions and billions of dollars of marketing spending. And if you read Ad Age regularly, you may remember back from 2006, there was a cover story about Wanamaker's quote, I know half my ad dollars are wasted, I'm just not sure which half. And they made the joke, well, actually it's only, it's less than half, it's 34% or whatever. Well, that was actually a cover story that was based upon the book I wrote called What Sticks, and our analysis of 36 different campaigns from a range of marketers in different categories and industries, and looking at where waste comes from in marketing and quantifying how much of a typical budget is wasted in marketing. Since that time, we have updated that analysis, and in fact, you may have seen another cover story in Ad Age a couple, 2 months ago when I released my latest book, Surf's Up, where we looked at the same ROI, and I want to explain this chart a little bit so you can see what we're looking at and why we were somewhat alarmed. What this blue line represents and the blue dots represent if you were to examine each industry and look at specific campaigns and look at what is the potential for marketing to contribute to sales and profit and increases in positive brand perception and purchase intent and so forth. In other words, if you look at marketing doing its job, what is the optimal level at which it could contribute to the bottom line of a business? That's really what those blue dots represent. And we fit a line through that through the different industries to look at what the overall pattern looks like across different budget spending levels. The red dots represent real-world campaigns for those same marketers in those same industries, looking at what they actually achieved. And you can see a gap where what marketers are actually achieving is meaningfully below what is optimal. In fact, about 39% of one way of looking at it is you can look at it and say, well, 39% of marketers' investment is wasted. The big dot in the center represents the overall average of the different industries and the gap between what a marketer could be achieving and what they're actually achieving. So we look at this as a really big problem that's really motivating for us to try to figure out how do we help our clients, which are marketers, to get closer to their full potential out of marketing spending and investment. And as we take a step back from this challenge, we really recognize three fundamental ways in which we think we can help improve marketing ROI. One is that if we can get the budget process changed from updating last year's budget, or simply basing upon a share of voice comparison, or simply basing upon a share of marketing or advertising budget as a share of sales, and instead look at how each media can contribute to delivering ROI, to generating sales and profit and paying for itself, then you'd actually end up with a different share of media allocations, and you would achieve higher levels of performance for marketing. So the number one point is we think that if you use ROI planning software based upon these spend to impact response functions we'll talk about in a moment, we think that that can help improve marketing productivity. The second one is an observation that even when marketers are spending in the right categories of advertising, they don't always execute that as well as they potentially could. Best practices that they've developed or that the industry has developed about how to make an effective advertisement are sometimes lost. For example, I was just on the call the other day with a group of people that were talking about advertisements in magazines and the fact that there's been some research that shows that facing the car one direction versus another actually produces different impact in ROI. Well, that kind of insight, making sure that that's available to the marketer at the time and when they're developing the advertisement so that they can get the best bang for their buck within that media, is also a great way of improving ROI. And of course, the third thing is even when you have the best plans and you're executing the media in the exact way that's best practice, there are things that can happen that are unexpected. Geopolitical issues, changes in a big storm coming through, changes to the economy, and therefore, or competitive actions. And therefore, the third area that we find that marketers can improve the ROI is by monitoring campaigns as they unfold and being able to be in a position where they can make quick mid-course adjustments in areas, if needed, to adapt to the changing marketplace. So our perspective of where we're coming from in doing this mobile analysis was, number one, there wasn't much research that told us where mobile should fit into that optimal allocation. We wanted to solve that. Secondly, there wasn't really a codified list of best practices about how to make an effective mobile advertisement, achieve the ROI its ROI potential. So we wanted to address that point. And to some degree, we also wanted to take a look at how would you integrate measuring mobile advertising as a campaign unfolds in a cross-media campaign so that you could adapt it if you needed to. So really from these three perspectives, we've embarked on doing this research. And what we deliver to marketers oftentimes is really this answer of the optimal allocation that you see in the plan forecast and a specific estimate of how much impact you would get for that money. Secondly, the campaign execution issues around getting the right and of course the third one, which is measuring and optimizing ROI with dashboards and tracking. And we recognize that mobile needed to be looked at very specifically in each of these different areas to build out some more knowledge and insights. We just to clarify, we do not work for trade associations. We really work for CMOs and VPs of media usually, or VPs of marketing, brand managers occasionally, to measure their return on investment. So all of this work is coming through the lens of, what kind of information would be valuable to marketers. And we've actually just, I shared this research and these white paper that we'll share with you a couple weeks ago with our internal clients at some of these organizations, and I'm excited to share it with the ANA. We have a long partnership with the ANA in terms of doing training and sharing our insights and information, and the ANA was, in fact, part of that ING study back in 2003 as the ANA was involved in all of the cross-media research that Marketing Evolution innovated and pioneered. And so it is continuing this with you. So my only agenda coming from Marketing Evolution is really how do we reduce the waste in marketing and improve productivity in marketing. And I hope that you will find the insights and information that we share with you useful. So let me turn to the second topic that out of 5 that we would tackle, which is level setting on how we look at marketing ROI. This will give you some good context to think about the dynamics that drive the recommendation for mobile as a share of the mix. So I oftentimes think of ROI here as the pie chart of what becomes the allocation later on. And what's important to understand about that allocation part is that it begins by understanding how people use different media and how they're exposed to advertising in various forms, and how they ultimately make purchase decisions or change their brand attitudes and perceptions that can lead to purchase decisions down the road. And what we want to create is something that you've seen the acronym SURF, which is a spend to impact response function, to represent that relationship with media and the effectiveness of that media at different levels of a marketer's spending. So if you think about at the bottom, on the x-axis, you have the money that you could spend in advertising and marketing, and then on the y-axis, you have impact, which could be sales, it could be purchase intent, it could be brand favorability or awareness. Depending on what your marketing objective is, we will create a different SURF curve for each of those different metrics so that we can match the right allocation to the right marketing objective. Now, what you may notice in this curve is it's not a straight line. It curves. As you spend more money, there's diminishing returns, and you get incrementally a little bit less impact each incremental dollar that you spend. And that's a very typical pattern in media. And in fact, when you look at this, you can look at more than one line. You can look at this as your overall marketing spending. You can also look at it as comparing different media. For example, these 2 lines here actually represent the difference between a 15-second television ad in TV and a 15-second video ad, the same ad, on the internet, and we could also look at that and extend it to mobile devices. And what you may already be able to guess is which one is which. Interestingly, the exact same ad will perform differently in different media. And what we know about that ROI data is that the green line represents how it works in a digital platform. And what happens is that if the ad is delivered in a pre-roll, people who have just requested the video are more likely to be much more attentive to the ad because they just requested a video on demand. And therefore, you have a much steeper impact, but you also have faster diminishing returns. If you play that ad a second time, a third time, a fourth time, it has very little incremental value after that first showing on that same day. Compare that to television, and because people may be looking down at their iPad while the TV ad is playing, or they may be doing something else the first time the TV ad's playing, you can show it the second and third time and get more incremental impact, but you'll have less impact on the first time of showing it because of that attentiveness dynamic. So part of what we're capturing in these curves is an intersection between how people use media and its impact and effectiveness. And we do that by measuring purely what is the, we don't care as much about the reach and frequency dynamic per se. We're really interested in how that translates into changing a consumer's attitude or behavior towards the brand. So if we look at some of the different media, you can compare different media and look at the different patterns of the spend impact response function. And you should see pretty good results or a range of different results from different marketers. So continuing on this point here, many of these concepts from how spend impact response functions work. I see a note here that we lost audio for a little bit, so I'll just check back with Greg about if we've lost this for a bit, and I can repeat some of the points in the slides I went over. Okay, so let me go ahead and dive in here into the next point here, which is we've talked a little bit about how we look at spend impact response functions and how different media have different impact, and you can plot those out and compare them side by side, and you can integrate them into an analysis that then says, okay, well, for each incremental dollar I'm going to spend, where am I most likely to get the best ROI or impact? And that's really, in fact, talked about quite a bit in the book Surf's Up. And what I talked about specifically is some of the different VPs of marketing and CMOs that have used this type of these spend impact response functions to determine the optimal level of total marketing spending, to forecast sales based upon different levels of marketing spend, to determine the optimal media mix and marketing mix, and then also to look at how external factors might impact marketing productivity and what changes you might make. So if you're interested in learning a lot more about the logic of how these spend impact response functions are being applied inside marketing organizations, the book's certainly a resource. And then also, if you're coming to the ANA Masters of Marketing, we're doing a whole workshop on the first day looking at how spend impact response functions in social media and other media, how they work and what that implies in terms of managing your business. So I'd encourage you to contact the ANA, sign up for the workshop and learn more about that. Or they're also taking that as a roadshow to train marketers inside their own organization. So if you're interested in that training, it's part of the ANA School of Marketing, and it's called Impact Marketing. So I want to level set with that part here because it's important to have a framework for how spend impact response functions work so that as we look at mobile, you can see the dynamics. And so, coming back to mobile, what we need to understand to plot mobile's spend impact response function is we need to know the cost dynamics. We need to know how much impact you typically get, and that needs to come from precise measurement of exposed and control at different frequency points. And we need to know how people use the media, and so that we can plot, are you getting the first view from somebody, or are you getting the second or third view? And that's where reach and frequency dynamics play in and intersect with impact for us to plot that diminishing returns curve. So when we put all of those pieces together, we looked for the impact data first, and we found 45 best-in-class studies that used that proper expose control measurement, and there was over 26,000 respondents, 26,899 to be precise. Now, that's great news because that means we have got a critical mass across a lot of different industries and campaigns to really have stability in the data to say, we can be very confident in these recommendations and conclusions. This is a good number of studies and campaigns of diversity. Now, the downside was that we actually examined over 500 studies, and what we found in 90% of the cases, the measurement for mobile over the last few years kind of moved to a convenience sample where most of the research was being done by only by people who clicked on the mobile ad. So it didn't really represent the 99% of people that didn't click on the ad. And what we know from research looking at people who click on online ads is that those people are more involved with the brand, and therefore we saw a lot of bias in the overall mobile data set that's out there. We saw one press headline that said mobile advertising is 5 times more effective than online. As we looked deeper into that, we saw that they were really only surveying people after they clicked on the ad, which is, exaggerates the impact of mobile. So one of the other lessons just from this part is if you're doing mobile ROI research, please check the methodology and make sure that they're not only sampling people who clicked on the ads, but also the people that haven't clicked on the ads, because otherwise you may be exaggerating the effect of mobile by a very large margin, and that may give you a false sense for how much you should invest in mobile and what's effective and what's not effective. So we're working on an academic paper to explain more about that. I have an early version of that if you're interested in getting deeper into the methodological issues. But, for most marketers, it's safe to say there are some good best practice studies out there. There's a good critical mass of them. We're going to use those in our analysis and talk about them in a moment, and just, give the heads up to your research departments to be aware of and avoid the post-click surveying only if you are doing mobile measurement. Okay, so diving in, with mobile, we were able to find these 45 studies, and we were able to have enough data to look at ads on the mobile web, also known as display ads in apps, ads, mobile video, mobile games, mobile social, and then ads on tablets such as the iPad. We weren't able to find enough critical mass on SMS or mobile search or mobile couponing or branded apps. We have done research in these different areas, but there just wasn't enough studies done that we were able to aggregate to fit a spend-to-impact response function and make a broad industry statement. So if you're interested in learning more about some of these other areas, by all means, please contact us. We can talk offline a little bit about research that you've done or research that we've done, because we'd like to do more in this work. But really, I'm going to focus on the first 6, which frankly is really the main core of what mobile advertising is from an industry standpoint today. So why should this matter to a marketer? Well, the headline here for us was kind of mind-blowing. It was, first of all, for the first time, this is we can look at mobile on a cross-media ROI planning standpoint and make a side-by-side comparison to other media and come to a optimal insight, optimal recommendation on what share of your budget should be going to mobile and what can you expect. We can forecast the results incrementally of what you would get for that same budget with mobile in the mix versus mobile not in the mix. And I think that's a pretty big deal. We're pretty excited about that. We'll be giving this data to Telmar to put into their ROI software for media planning. We're using this for our clients right now today, and we're making the general white paper available. We've shared it with the MMA. I shared it with Stuart Elliott over at the New York Times earlier today. He's writing a blog later on today about it. So we're excited to get that inside information out there and available to you personally and to the marketplace in general. What we find from it is that if you look at a category like automotive, and you look at a launch budget, you're launching a new car, you're a big automotive marketer, you're spending $50 million, the recommendation is that mobile should be between 8 and 9% of your overall media budget, depending on whether you're going for an awareness goal or purchase intent. You can also draw from this data point here that mobile does work a little bit better, lower on in the purchase process towards purchase intent. And that's not that, I guess, let me say it another way. Mobile gets a larger share of the mix on something like purchase intent. It gets a little bit of a less of a share on an objective like awareness. And that's in part driven by the fact that there are other media that are very strong in awareness, such as television. So it's not less of a statement that mobile's weaker in a certain area and more of a statement that there are some other media choices that are stronger in certain areas. So this is a lot more than what most marketers are spending today in mobile. Right now, mobile represents about between 1 and 2% of the overall marketing budget. So this type of an increase based upon this ROI data, I think will be eye-opening for a lot of folks. Overall, on average, automotive represents a higher end of the estimate of what we would say marketers should be spending in mobile. The overall average that we're looking at is 7%. And if you look at the range, you would see something like automotive as a higher involvement category, getting 8 or 9%, and then you would see a lower involvement category like entertainment, maybe getting 5%, and CPG potentially getting around that, or perhaps a little bit less in certain situations. So this 7% number is, again, many times higher than what most marketers are spending today. And so our recommendation is that a marketer should first and foremost begin to really think about, is there an opportunity to move faster than what the competition does to take advantage of mobile? And how do you do that in a way that makes sure that the mobile advertising that you're running is following best practice principles and is able to generate the type of ROI that we saw across the 45 studies that we aggregated together for this analysis? So I want to talk a little bit about the data and get a bit into deeper detail here. And as I was explaining the surf charts earlier, one thing that you may have noticed from the initial discussion with the 2 video ads was that you can look for optimization looking at a surf chart from left to right. So as we look at this surf chart on the right side, the things that you're going to want to spend first are the ones that have the steepest slope. And so what we find in that situation is things like games and ads. That has one of the steeper slopes, but you can also see it hits diminishing returns pretty quickly. You can see how that curve begins to flatten out. And so as we begin to look at that part, the order in which you would spend if you have a small budget would be to spend on some of the steeper slope curves first, and then move to the flatter curves as you have a larger budget. So if you were a large marketer spending between $3 and $5 million in mobile, we would suggest that your allocation would look something like this. So your ads and apps would be about 28%. That would be the largest share. And that's that curve that builds up to, it's first of all a fairly steep curve. And as you can see, it's the tallest curve, which means its diminishing returns kicks in much later than some of the other curves. It keeps building for a while. Now, games actually ends up being the smallest share. It's not because it doesn't have great ROI. It does have great ROI. It's just that it hits diminishing returns fairly quickly. You saturate that population who are engaged in games fairly quickly. So this gives a snapshot of where to be spending in if you had $3 to $5 million on a large campaign. And next, what I'll talk about is I want to come back to unpacking a bit more about this headline, which is, for the first time we can see where mobile fits into a media plan on a side-by-side basis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some data where we include mobile and then we take mobile out. And you can see the incremental difference in business performance. And then we'll look at where mobile is drawing from in order to optimize the media mix. And then what I'm going to do is, this is really the fourth topic that we're talking about, which is mobile's share of the mix. And then I'll turn to some additional resources and open it up for Q&A. Okay, so let's dive in. This first chart is the general concept, same budget, better results. So we've capped the budget at $50 million. We're looking at automotive as the case example. And we've basically said, okay, if mobile's in the mix versus mobile outside of the mix, what would happen to your overall business results? And what we see is that for the exact same budget without spending a single penny more, you can get about 3 to 4% more productivity out of marketing by having mobile play its role in optimizing the mix. And so that's really, you see that the chart on the right, which includes the impact of mobile, is a bit of a taller chart, and you can see that it, as you mentioned before, on average it's about 7%. In automotive it would be 8% for awareness, and purchase intent it would be 9% of the overall budget, but its contribution to impact even though the budget's the exact same, the contribution to impact would increase your productivity by, again, 3 to 4%. So one of the questions we've gotten a few times is, so, okay, where is mobile pulling from? And again, these are general case studies, and so I recognize that many of you may not be in the automotive category, or you may have very specific situations or needs for your brand. And so I just want to add caution here and say, what we do with our clients and our marketers is we run specific runs for their business, for their dynamics in terms of ROI, and so you may get a different result. So I'm using this more as an object lesson in terms of what kind of patterns are we seeing. And if you would like to follow up and get into greater depth, then by all means, please try to come to the workshop at the ANA, or do the training, or contact us offline, and we can follow up and talk about how it might specifically affect your business. But as a general point, mobile draws from television, digital, and a little bit from magazines. And so it's not that it takes, you swap one media out for another. Rather, as you're looking at that optimization and trying to make sure each dollar is productive as it can, you can see that it will trim a little bit back from what you would spend in TV. So if I look at purchase intent at the top, for example, without mobile, you can look at network TV, for example, at 21%. And you can look at cable at 23%. And syndication at 22%. And so if you jump over to the left side with mobile, you see that network goes down to 16%, cable goes down 1% to 22%, and syndication goes down 1% to 21%. And you can also see a little bit coming out of digital, and you can see a little bit coming out of magazine as well. And that ends up being true, to a little bit of a different extent if you're trying to really affect awareness. And what depending on what your goal is, what your industry is, you'll see a slightly different pattern. But we've seen that typically where mobile's drawing its budget from. Now, some people have asked, hey, can I just take some of my digital budget and put it directly into mobile? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. You can reallocate your budget any way that you would like. But the optimal way, if you really want to improve productivity, is to really go through and evaluate each media and what's contributing to that overall marketing objective and goal. And that's why we usually turn to software to do that, because those are, there's trillions of different combinations of how you can mix the media. So let me turn to the next topic, which is how will mobile evolve from here? We've given a 7% recommendation, but I should be clear that that's really what is optimal today. And the trends show that mobile adoption, which means that the expanded reach, availability for what mobile advertising can do, should be increasing pretty consistently over the next 5 years. And so if we hold all other pricing for different media constant, and we assume that the impact is going to be similar today as it is in the future, and the only dynamic that's changing is that more and more people are getting smartphones and tablet devices, and they're potentially using mobile a bit more in their lives, then we would see that the share of mobile and the contribution it can make will increase, and that the allocation will go from 7% in 2012 to 10% by 2016. So from long-term planning, I think that this is, even if you don't decide to go to 7% tomorrow or next year, the priority on researching that and figuring that out quickly, I think that this is definitely should be a priority for many marketing organizations. I also think that if you think about the productivity issue of what's the cost of not shifting to mobile if a competitor is really very aggressive in mobile, and you can think about that as being a compounding effect of a competitor getting 3 to 4% more productivity on each marketing dollar each year for the next several years for as long as that gap persists. And what we've seen in certainly in online advertising when we looked at how that evolved was those marketers that moved faster and really understood what made for effective online advertising. They were able to grow their market share at a faster rate because they were getting that compounded productivity improvement from reallocation, whereas their competitors were not. So we think this is a good opportunity for marketers, and we think that there's actually some risk for those that are slow to move, because as you look at this trend, the adoption curves are moving fairly quickly, and the value and productivity of mobile marketing is from our perspective, pretty definitively proven across those 45 different studies. Okay, so some next steps. One of the most important next step is, if you haven't done a lot of mobile advertising, you got to take the leap. You got to begin to experiment. And our advice on the experimentation is to do it, doing it just for the sake of saying that you've done mobile advertising isn't going to add a whole lot of value to the organization, but doing it with a pretty clear learning agenda, so you know what you're researching for, you're knowing how you're trying to figure it out, whether it's a creative issue and doing A/B split tests to figure out what types of creative is going to work best for you, whether it's a segmentation issue, trying to figure out what segments of your customer base is going to work best for, or if it's just a general issue of trying to figure out, testing the marketplace and trying to figure out which companies are easiest to work for and which ones have the best price to value relationship, because let's face it, the CPMs and pricing are still pretty spread out. There hasn't really been enough consolidation to where you can say, well, this is the typical price for mobile. We certainly have some good averages and norms out there, but I'd say that there's still a lot of diversity, and that's an area to learn quite a bit about. Whatever it is, we think that being very focused on what insights you want to draw from using mobile advertising, especially in the next 24 months, so you can develop your own bank of best practice insights about how to use mobile, and you can develop your own spend impact response function for what is the ROI you get from mobile. That will allow you to really figure out what is the optimal percentage for your brand and for a specific situation. The other next step that we'll talk about in terms of resources is, get the mobile white paper that we've written. If you're interested in the research side of it and the post-click, we'll make that available to you as well. We'll give you the link to the white paper in a bit, and we're sharing that with the ANA so they can put it up in their library. If you're interested in learning more about these software tools so you can put in your own brand and your own target audiences and so forth, Telmar is a great resource for that. We can help you with that directly if you're interested. But I'd encourage you to play around with different scenarios and really begin to think through where mobile is most likely to make a contribution to your business, and I would start in a particular corner of your business to develop that experience and knowledge base and data set, so that you can then decide if you want to expand that fairly quickly across some of your other brands. Is a great place to start, and then putting it into practice is a great thing. The third one is, we want to make it to where you understand the underlying dynamics of the data and you feel really confident, and you don't need someone from Marketing Evolution to explain how the spend impact response functions work and so forth. And so if you are interested in becoming more educated about the underlying pillars that drive ROI and how spend impact response functions work to drive ROI, number one, my book's already made the cover of Ad Age and a bestseller, so I'm not concerned about selling you anything. I will send you a free copy of it or get you the PDF thing or whatever, because that's a great place to start for more education on how these things work, or come to the ANA training sessions and so forth. Or we're happy to talk with you offline to fill you in just from the standpoint of, we think that marketers that are smarter about how ROI works will make much better decisions, and you're likely to find the next big thing after mobile, because I think the one thing that we can count on is that mobile won't be the last innovation in marketing. So with that, I'm going to share one thing that we are doing, and then we'll open up for Q&A. We are doing a consortium with some of our marketers and potentially with some of the ANA members, and if you're interested, we're happy to share it with you, which is, we think that we're at a state sort of like where the internet was 10 years ago, where getting marketers together to do research together and share their learning together in a non-competitive way can open up some ideas and insights that may be harder to see if you just do the research alone. So if you're interested in being part of this mobile measurement consortium to build learning across some different organizations, I'm going to give you Tim Petrella's contact info for a bit, but we've got some great questions about which specific mobile types are most effective for each marketing objective, which creative elements are most effective in driving marketing impact, how do mobile marketing contributions compare to other vehicles, how do you create synergy with mobile and, say, paid search or social media or television for that matter. There's a lot of really interesting questions that really, even the 45 studies have some great data in there, but there's a lot of questions that are still to be asked and answered. And so if you're interested in being part of that, we'd love to find a way to work with you on that. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Back to you, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Rex. Great job with the presentation. We do have plenty of time for questions, so we'll get right into those. Just a quick reminder to all of our attendees that you can continue to submit questions right now in the Q&A panel on the bottom right side of your screen. Also, just want to remind attendees that the slide deck and a video recording from this event will also be available on the website for on-demand viewing and download by the end of the week. So let's get right into a couple of the first questions that were asked by our attendees. In reference to slide 16, I'm not sure, let's try to get back to slide 16.
Oh, sorry, you driving?
Yeah, sorry. We had an attendee who was wondering if the conclusion to the slide is if brand awareness is 10%, would the mobile spend allocation also be 10%? Or could you just kind of, share what the conclusion is?
Oh, yeah, sorry. To revisit this slide, what we were looking at on this slide is we were trying to look at, we ran a lot of different simulations through the data set to see, what would be your allocation if you spent $5 million, what if you spent $75 million, and all points in between. What if your goal was awareness? What if your goal was purchase intent? What if you're an automotive marketer? What if you're a CPG marketer? What if you're in pharma? And so we ran really hundreds of simulations through. And so the overall average recommendation is 7%. But you'll find some situations where the allocation for mobile is 0. And you'll find some that it maybe gets about as high as about 10%, with automotive being really the higher area. And so what we were trying to do in this chart was to summarize, first looking at product category. If you're in a high involvement category like automotive or finance, we see that those are the simulations that recommended the larger share of the mix to mobile. Those are the areas where mobile contributes disproportionately to lifting your key marketing objectives. Where mobile got less share of the mix tended to be in the lower involvement categories. CPG is being a great example. It's not to say that you would spend nothing in CPG. It's just that there are some scenarios in, particularly if you have a really small budget in CPG, where we wouldn't say that mobile should be the first thing you should do in investment. It's usually the second or third thing, or maybe fourth thing. Because there are other marketing vehicles that really do great for ROI in CPG. So by product category, you can say if I'm a high involvement category, I should be maybe above 7%. If I'm a low involvement category, I'm going to be below 7%. The next column over on the right side is when we looked at different campaign goals. So if you said, my goal is really driving purchase intent, I'm trying to drive consideration and sales, I'm trying to close the deal, we tend to find that mobile was more effective really as you get closer to that purchase decision. So that would be a higher, above 7%. And we tended to find that there was a little bit less in the categories where you're just trying to affect general awareness. And again, that's not necessarily a statement that mobile isn't effective in building awareness. It's more of a statement that marketers have other marketing vehicles available to them, television being a prime example, that is that generates more ROI per dollar spent to build awareness, and therefore mobile really begins to only come in after you begin to hit diminishing returns on some of those primary media that are the best at driving awareness. So hopefully that makes this chart make a lot more sense in terms of figuring out. So you can look at yourself as a marketer and say, am I high involvement, am I low involvement, am I going for awareness or more purchase intent and sales, and decide which direction you may lean on tweaking that 7% number, either up or down.
Great, thank you. And throughout the examples in your presentation, did you incorporate direct mail? And if so, what was the percentage of allocation that you gave to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. We have in our white paper the whole list of all the media that we included. We do not include direct mail as a media line item. We include it in the marketing mix, but we don't put it in the media mix. Now, some clients of ours do have it in our software and our tool in the media mix, but because most of our marketers have it as a separate line item budget as part of a different budget that's not part of media, we did not include it in this analysis. Again, happy to do that for a specific client especially if we already work together to show you how it would fit in and how that would change. But yeah, if you put direct mail in, then that 7% would go down because now, to the extent that direct mail may outperform mobile in certain areas or have different ROI dynamics, you'll get a different answer than how we looked at it, which was really just not including direct mail as a media.
Great, thank you. And what is your perspective about which mobile types are driving the largest absolute lifts, regardless of their cost?
Yeah, we found that there is some differences, and I was talking through a fairly complicated chart earlier and trying to point out how you can look at the different patterns of the surf curves. And it's funny, as I was presenting that, I was realizing that what I take for granted and look like every day might be, somebody seeing it for the very first time might be saying, "What is he talking about?" These curves are kind of confusing. So to break it down in terms of where you would start, I think is really the core question, right? So if you were to look at the mobile ROI that seem to be performing a little bit better, we do see the tablets do perform a little bit above average. We also see rich media type things like video in particular that work above average, and games. So if you were to say, you know what, I'm not going to be spending $3 to $5 million on mobile, I'm going to be spending a lot less than that, where should I have average ROI initially on a small budget? And then as we pointed out with games, as your budget gets larger, don't just keep spending more and more and more in games unless you have ROI research that shows you have not hit diminishing returns, because our research shows that you're going to hit diminishing returns fairly quickly in games and saturate that, and you're going to want to move your budget around to some of the areas that haven't hit diminishing returns.
Great, thank you. Next question from one of our attendees. Would you recommend a higher percentage of marketing spend for a device that works with and enhances smartphones? Do you have a perspective around that?
Yeah, repeat that question again. Let me make sure I understand what we're asking.
It might require some clarification, but would you recommend a higher percentage for marketing a device that works with and enhances smartphones?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got a product that is targeted to people who have a smartphone device, and you're saying, hey, you in many ways, if you've really defined the target audience as people who already have these smart devices, then yeah, absolutely, mobile should be a larger share because you've got almost 100% concentration of your intended target audience on the mobile device. So that would absolutely lead to a higher number. In a car, you look at automotive in a situation, and really part of the dynamic that I showed at the end, where we see mobile growing from 7% to 10% by 2016, it's because in most categories, the majority of your customers do not have a smartphone. The majority of the customers do have television and internet and may read magazines and so forth. And so one of the limiting factors on how much mobile gets as a share of the mix is the fact that the penetration of smartphones and devices is still climbing, and it's not 100%. But if you had a category that was, all your customers had smartphones, then absolutely you'd spend more in mobile than the 7% we've recommended.
Great, thank you. Next question. If marketers were to shift money to mobile and inventory costs became higher, would mobile impact still justify the higher cost?
Yeah, we did some sensitivity testing on pricing because, as I mentioned before, we did get some really good real-world cost and CPM. We see that in our system for our clients because we're constantly measuring ROI for our clients 365 days a year, and so we know what the real costs are, as opposed to all the published stuff, which can be pipe dream, and I think would be the technical term. So first of all, we looked at real-world costs, and then the second thing we did is we noticed that there is a dispersion of costs, that the marketplace, sometimes for something fairly similar, you'll pay a higher price in one place and a much lower price in another. So there is a range in the spread, and so we were curious to say, well, how sensitive are our recommendations to pricing? What we saw is that if mobile could go up about 25% in cost, and we would still be making the same recommendation. Past that 25%, well, now the price-value relationship. You remember those surf curves and how cost does influence, does play into those curves. As it goes above 25% pricing increase, if impact does not increase with that price increase, then we begin to trade off to other media that are going to generate better ROI. Ironically, one of the things that's happened with all this digital shift is that the cost of magazines in some places has come down, and so we find ourselves in kind of this odd place, having been the pioneers of measuring online display advertising and mobile and social media and so forth, actually going back and telling a few marketers, hey, by the way, have you seen what's been happening with the ROI from magazines? Because it's actually been going up because the pricing's been going down. So the same thing could happen with mobile. If mobile pricing goes up, the ROI goes down. It can go up about 25% before we would change our recommendation. Beyond that point, you should revisit and play with the software tool and see, where your budget should go instead.
Great. And have you found that devices with larger screens are more effective at driving lift than devices with smaller screens?
Yeah, I think that's different overall usage profile of how people what content they're consuming, and what needs they're gratifying. So that is one of those areas. I mentioned before about doing this consortium, and so if you're a marketer with those kind of questions, please contact us, because we'd love to either put that into our list of learning agenda items, because we have some general idea that larger screens did work better. The tablet works better than the smartphone, but we don't know why. Maybe it's because what people are doing with it is different. And if you're on the go with a smartphone, even though the screen might be smaller, if you're trying to do some research on a new car purchase and you're at the dealer and so forth, that might make it, that location-based, targeted, in-the-moment purchase decision may trump the size of the screen effect. And so really the truth is that right now at this point for the industry, we only have, we don't have the answer to that question. We have some answers to the fundamental basic questions, but I love that question. I'd love to dig deeper into it and help design research that would get us to some of those answers.
Great, thanks. So I think we have time for one last question. Rex, what is your perspective around why mobile isn't getting more share of spend right now? Why hasn't it grown faster? Yeah,
when I was talking to Stuart Elliott from the New York Times today, he said it's he likened it to this is the media is going to be great someday, and someday is always tomorrow. It always seems to be further out there. Hopefully he uses that in his blog, and so I can read and remember exactly how he phrased it, because it was brilliant. But it gets to the heart of the question, which is, why hasn't this popped yet? First of all, I think that it has that consumer adoption has already popped. It's that most marketing budget making does not use spend impact response functions and these ROI data. I mean, this database that we've built is the largest database of ROI data, and we've only made it available for media planning in the last year. And so, really, I just think that the main thing is most marketers don't have the answer from software and ROI data to say this is what's optimal. And so what they do is they rely on their gut, or they rely on last year's budget, and maybe they do a little bit of innovation, which brings you up to about 1 or 2% of your marketing spending. But when you get beyond that point, a lot of questions are asked, and if you don't have the ROI data behind it to back up why you should make that change doesn't happen. So now that this paper is available, the ROI data is out there, it's available. People can dig deeper into it, they can get the software and play the what-if scenarios, and I hope to see marketers take advantage of that and get more productivity out of their marketing as a result of it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have today. Rex, do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
Really, if you've got any questions, again, we're not here to sell you anything. We really love the idea of education around how ROI works and getting deeper into this type of things. We love doing this kind of research because I think it helps the overall industry, and this is what makes it an exciting industry to work in, is getting some of these new insights and watching industries emerge and develop, and people build more successful businesses and careers as a result of embracing new insights and information. So if there's anything we can do to help you on your journey inside your organization, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Tim, and you can download the white paper that I mentioned before at the link that's up on the screen. And if there's anything else we can do to help us, please help you get the right answer, don't hesitate to call on us. We're happy to help.
All right. Thank you very much again. Great job with the presentation. Thank you for your insight.